Welcome back, and thank you for joining us. Whether you're listening late at night, during a quiet moment in the day, or simply out of curiosity, you're very welcome here. In today's video, we'll be diving into a fascinating and often misunderstood part of real history, the Ottoman Imperial Harem. Not the myths or fantasies, but the reality behind palace walls, the power structures, the politics, the routines, and the lives of the women who lived at the very heart of one of history's greatest empires. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. And if you enjoy deep, story-driven history like this, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps support this content and lets you know when new stories are uploaded. I'd also love to know, where are you listening from today? Feel free to leave a comment and share your location or what drew you to this story. Now let's step back in time and enter the hidden world of the Ottoman Imperial Harem. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire ruled vast lands across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Its armies were feared, its wealth immense, and its sultans among the most powerful men in the world. But behind the public image of military strength and imperial authority existed a world few outsiders ever saw. A world hidden behind guarded doors and high palace walls. A world that shaped the future of the empire just as much as battles and treaties. This was the Imperial Harem. To many outsiders, the word harem has been misunderstood, romanticized, or deliberately distorted. Western imagination often reduced it to fantasy, indulgence, and excess. In reality, the Ottoman Imperial Harem was something very different. It was a carefully controlled institution, a political environment, a place of strict hierarchy, education, discipline, and power. And for some women, it became the most dangerous and influential place in the empire. The purpose of the Imperial Harem. The Ottoman Harem existed for one central reason: control. Control over lineage, control over succession, control over who could produce the next ruler of the empire. Ottoman sultans did not marry in the traditional royal sense. Instead, the continuation of the dynasty depended on women who lived inside the harem. This system was designed to prevent foreign royal families from gaining influence through marriage. By keeping all potential mothers of future sultans inside the palace, the Ottoman court maintained absolute authority over succession. Nothing about the harem was accidental. Every rule existed for a reason. Where the harem was located. The heart of the Ottoman Imperial Harem was located inside Topkapi Palace, the main residence of the sultans for nearly 4 centuries. The harem was not a single room. It was an entire complex, dozens of corridors, private courtyards, apartments, baths, schools, administrative chambers. It was guarded day and night by eunuchs whose loyalty was to the palace alone. Once inside, very few people ever left. Who entered the harem? Women entered the harem in several ways, most commonly through tribute, purchase, or capture during war. They came from many regions: the Balkans, the Caucasus, Eastern Europe, Central Asia. Most were young when they arrived. Upon entering the harem, their previous identities were erased. They were given new names, new clothing, a new language, a new religion. This was not chaos. It was systematic training. Education and training life in the harem followed strict routine. Women were educated in Ottoman Turkish, Islamic studies, etiquette and court behavior, music, poetry, and embroidery. They were trained to move, speak, and behave according to palace expectations. Silence was valued, observation was encouraged, discipline was enforced. Only a small number would ever be noticed by the Sultan. Most would spend their lives serving the palace in administrative or domestic roles. Hierarchy. Inside the harem. The harem operated under a rigid hierarchy. At the very top stood the most powerful woman in the empire, the Valide Sultan, the mother of the reigning sultan. Her authority was immense. She controlled finances, appointments, internal discipline, access to the sultan. Beneath her were senior women who managed daily operations, education, and security. Lower-ranked women performed duties ranging from teaching to maintenance. Every position was watched. Every promotion was political. Daily life inside the harem. Daily life inside the harem was structured and repetitive. Days began early. Lessons were held. Work was assigned. Courtyards filled with quiet movement. Meals were eaten communally and according to rank. Time passed slowly, marked by prayer calls and routine. This predictability was intentional. It reduced chaos. It maintained order. It reinforced control. The Sultan and access to the Sultan was rare and heavily controlled. Contrary to popular belief, the Sultan did not wander freely through the harem. Meetings were arranged. Moments were observed. Every interaction was reported. The goal was not indulgence. It was dynastic survival. Only one son from a woman would be acknowledged. This prevented rival brothers from sharing the same mother and forming alliances. Motherhood and power. If a woman bore a son, her status changed instantly. She was no longer merely part of the harem. She became a political figure. Her entire future depended on her son's survival. If her son eventually became sultan, she would become Valide Sultan, the most powerful woman in the empire. This created intense competition, quiet rivalries, careful alliances, constant observation. Power inside the harem was subtle, but deadly serious. Hurrem Sultan, a real example of power. One woman's rise illustrates the true nature of the harem better than any myth. Hurrem Sultan, known in the West as Roxolana, entered the harem as a captive. She rose not through beauty alone, but intelligence and political instinct. She became the legal wife of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, something unheard of in Ottoman tradition. She influenced state affairs, foreign policy, and succession. Her story shows that the harem was not a prison of pleasure. It was a court of power. Fear, silence, and survival life in the harem was not luxurious for most. It was quiet, restricted, closely watched. A misplaced word could end a career. A wrong alliance could destroy a future. Yet within this controlled environment, women learned how power truly worked, not through armies, but through access, timing, and influence. Myths versus reality. The greatest myth about the Ottoman harem is excess. The reality was routine over indulgence, discipline over pleasure, politics over romance. It was an institution designed to protect the empire, and it succeeded for centuries. The decline of the system. As the Ottoman Empire weakened, so did the harem's political role. Western reforms reduced its power. Public scrutiny increased. The old system slowly dissolved. But for hundreds of years, decisions made behind those palace walls shaped the fate of millions. The eunuchs, guardians of the harem. No discussion of the Ottoman Imperial Harem is complete without understanding the role of the eunuchs. They were not servants in the traditional sense. They were guards, messengers, and enforcers of palace law. Most eunuchs were taken from Africa or the Caucasus at a young age. Their physical condition placed them outside traditional family structures, which the Ottomans believed made them loyal only to the Sultan. Within the harem, eunuchs controlled movement between sections, communication with the outside world, access to the Sultan and the Valide Sultan. They memorized routines, schedules, and hierarchies. Nothing happened without being observed. Silence was enforced, not with noise, but with presence. Architecture as control. The physical design of the harem itself reinforced power. Corridors were narrow. Rooms were layered behind rooms. Doors opened only inward. Movement was deliberate and slow. Courtyards allowed light but limited escape. Windows faced inward, never outward. This architecture shaped daily life, where one could walk, who one could see, when one could speak. Even the space itself taught obedience. Daily rhythms and time. Inside the palace, time inside the harem moved differently. Days were structured around prayer times, lessons, meals, supervised rest. There were no clocks visible to most residents. Time was felt through repetition, not numbers. Morning lessons were quiet. Afternoons were spent working with hands, sewing, embroidery, cleaning, copying texts. Evenings were calm and controlled. Night brought stillness, not freedom. Food, clothing, and rank. Even food reinforced hierarchy. Meals were prepared centrally, but distributed according to rank. Higher-ranking women received more varied dishes, better quality fabrics. Private spaces, lower-ranking women ate communally and wore simpler clothing. Nothing was random. Clothing colors, jewelry, and even hairstyles indicated status. One glance was enough to know where someone stood. Letters, influence, and hidden communication. Though movement was restricted, information still flowed. Women inside the harem learned how to communicate subtly. Through trusted eunuchs, through coded language, through gifts and favors. Some women became skilled letter writers. Correspondence with foreign courts, religious leaders, and provincial governors passed through palace hands. Influence did not require public speech. It required timing. Religion and disciplined religion played a central role in daily life. Prayer structured the day. Instruction reinforced moral order. But religion also served another purpose: legitimacy. A woman who appeared devout gained protection. A woman accused of impropriety lost standing instantly. Public behavior mattered more than private thoughts. Discipline was internalized. Competition without open conflict. Unlike European courts, open confrontation was rare. Instead, competition was quiet, indirect. Patient advancement came through. Loyalty to powerful figures. Careful alliances. Being useful, not visible. The most successful women were often the least noticed. Survival depended on restraint. Motherhood, revisited. A dangerous blessing. While bearing a son brought status, it also brought danger. Once a woman had a son, her movements were more restricted, her alliances scrutinized, her rivals multiplied. Her fate became inseparable from her child's. If her son failed, so did she. If he rose, so did she. Power was never secure, only temporary. The prince's education sons raised in the palace lived separate lives. They were educated in governance, religion, military theory, languages. But they were also isolated. Brothers were not raised together to prevent unity. This isolation created rulers who who were prepared but often lonely. The harem shaped them long before the throne did. Fear as a political tool. Fear inside the harem was not chaotic. It was controlled. Punishment was rare but memorable. Exile, isolation, or reassignment were common consequences. The uncertainty was more effective than violence. No one ever knew how close they were to losing everything. European misinterpretations. When European diplomats and travelers wrote about the harem, they filled gaps with imagination. They could not enter, they could not observe, so they speculated. These fantasies spread and hardened into myth. The reality was far less indulgent and far more political. Women as political actors. Despite restrictions, women in the harem funded mosques, sponsored charities, influenced appointments, shaped succession. Their power was informal, but real. The empire did not ignore them. It depended on them. The long shadow of the harem. Even after reforms reduced its authority, the legacy remained. Ideas about controlled succession, palace education, centralized power continued to shape Ottoman governance. The harem was not an anomaly. It was a system, and systems leave traces. Final reflection. The Ottoman Imperial Harem was neither a fantasy nor a prison. It was a political engine, a place where power moved quietly, where decisions were delayed, redirected, or destroyed without spectacle. History often remembers swords and crowns, but for centuries, the fate of an empire rested behind closed doors, in routines, rules, and restrained ambition. Life inside the Ottoman Imperial. Life inside the Ottoman Imperial Harem was governed not only by hierarchy, but by an unspoken culture of observation. Every movement, every word spoken, and every relationship formed was quietly noticed. Women learned very early that visibility could be dangerous. The most successful individuals were often those who blended into routine, who learned when to speak and when to remain silent. In an environment where advancement depended on favor and survival depended on restraint, patience became a powerful skill. Silence inside the harem was not emptiness. It was deliberate. Long stretches of the day passed with little conversation, broken only by lessons, prayer, or instruction. The absence of noise created an atmosphere in which small changes were immediately noticed. A shift in routine, a change in tone, or an unexpected summons could signal opportunity or danger. Over time, women learned to read these subtle signs with precision. The concept of privacy inside the harem differed greatly from modern understanding. While the harem was closed to the outside world, true privacy within it was rare. Rooms were shared, schedules overlapped, and supervision was constant. Even moments of solitude were shaped by rules. This lack of privacy reinforced dependence on the institution itself, ensuring that loyalty remained with the palace rather than with individuals. Education inside the harem extended beyond formal lessons. Young women learned through imitation, observation, and correction. They watched how senior women carried themselves, how they spoke to eunuchs, how they responded to authority. Mistakes were rarely forgiven twice. Over time, behavior became refined, controlled, and measured. Emotional restraint was valued as highly as obedience. The role of senior women within the harem was administrative as much as personal. They oversaw training, enforced discipline, and ensured that palace customs were followed precisely. These women acted as intermediaries between lower-ranking members and the highest authority. Their power did not come from public recognition, but from control over access, information, and recommendation. A word spoken in the right moment could alter a life's course. The Valide Sultan's presence shaped every aspect of the harem. Her authority was felt even when she was not physically present. Decisions about education, promotion, punishment, and privilege passed through her influence. Women understood that her approval was essential, and her disapproval could be devastating. The position demanded political awareness, emotional control, and absolute loyalty to the stability of the dynasty. The rhythm of the seasons also influenced life inside the palace. Summer brought heat and stillness, with shaded courtyards and reduced activity. Winter encouraged indoor work, longer hours of embroidery, study, and reflection. These seasonal patterns reinforced the sense of time passing slowly, predictably, and without urgency. Days were not counted by ambition, but by repetition. For many women, hope existed quietly rather than openly. Advancement was possible, but never guaranteed. A change in the Sultan's favor, the birth of a son, or the death of a rival could shift the balance suddenly. At the same time, the fall from favor could be swift and irreversible. Exile from the palace, reassignment, or permanent obscurity awaited those who miscalculated. The upbringing of princes was closely linked to the harem, yet carefully separated from it. Mothers were involved in their early care, but formal education was conducted under supervision. Princes were trained to rule, but also taught caution and restraint. They grew up aware of the weight of expectation and the dangers of succession. Brotherhood was discouraged, as unity among heirs could threaten the established order. Succession within the Ottoman Empire was never simple. Unlike European monarchies that followed strict primogeniture, Ottoman succession depended on survival and opportunity. This reality shaped the behavior of women within the harem profoundly. Each mother understood that her son's future determined her own. This connection created an environment where emotional attachment and political calculation existed side by side. Religious observance reinforced discipline within the harem. Prayer structured the day and provided moments of collective stillness. Religious instruction emphasized obedience, humility, and order. Yet religion also offered protection. A reputation for piety could shield a woman from suspicion, while accusations of impropriety could destroy standing instantly. Public perception mattered as much as reality. Charity played an important role in the lives of influential women. Through donations to religious institutions, schools, and public works, women extended their influence beyond palace walls. These acts strengthened legitimacy and created lasting legacies. Mosques, fountains, and educational endowments funded. These acts strengthened legitimacy and created lasting legacies. Mosques, fountains, and educational endowments funded by women of the harem still stand today as quiet reminders of their reach. The relationship between the harem and the outside political world was indirect but constant. Decisions made within palace walls influenced appointments, alliances, and policies across the empire. Eunuchs carried messages, managed correspondence, and controlled access. Through them, the the harem remained connected to the machinery of government without ever appearing publicly. As centuries passed, the structure of the harem evolved. Reforms, foreign influence, and internal change gradually reduced its political authority. The rise of modern bureaucratic governance shifted power away from palace households. Yet the institutional memory remained. The harem had shaped generations of rulers, administrators, and policies, leaving an imprint that could not be erased easily. The decline of the Ottoman Empire brought increased scrutiny from foreign observers. Travel accounts and diplomatic reports began to describe the harem with fascination and misunderstanding. These accounts often reflected the observer's cultural assumptions rather than reality. The true nature of the harem, disciplined and methodical, was overshadowed by imagination. In its final form, the imperial harem became less a center of power and more a symbol of tradition. Yet its historical significance remained undeniable. For centuries, it functioned as an institution that balanced control with continuity, personal ambition with dynastic survival.